Hi, Freddie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
And welcome back to all our listeners. It's been a little while. Things have been hectic, as I'm sure you guys have had as well. It is nearing Christmas, and we do celebrate it, so there's a lot to do. But today we're going to talk about. Do you want to go into it?
Oh, sure. We're going to talk about European politics. There's a great deal going on in Germany, France, and the UK, and of course, Ukraine, um, together with the insertion of North Korean troops. And then we want to talk about Vanuatu. There's been a terrible earthquake there and some new agreements with the Solomon Islands. And then finally, we'll end up with talking about the projected deficit for the Australian economy, giving another challenge to the Labor government.
Yeah, it seems only challenges at this point, really. So we're going to start off with Germany, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So recently, I think it was like the 8th of December, the German government basically collapsed. And then the Chancellor Olaf Scholz was trying to keep it all together, even though then he was in charge of a minority government because he had to fire his, I think it was the treasurer. I think he fired the treasurer of his government because they had opposing views on funding Ukraine and giving additional funds to Ukraine. So then he got himself in a situation where as minority government, all these forces were going against him and he was having to convince like the further right parties to support him on all his initiatives, which wasn't something he initially wanted to do. And now he got to the point where he felt the need to call a no confidence vote. And it obviously went against him. And now there's going to be an election, I think February 23rd in Germany. So the election was going to be the end of next year, and now it's going to be the beginning. So things are changing a lot, and especially given the fact that Europe is already in so much upheaval right now, the most powerful economy in the European Union to be going through a lot of political upheaval is not the best situation, I would say.
Exactly. And you think about having a caretaker government when Mr. Trump will be inaugurated as president at the end of January. It's not perfect timing. So, and just bringing our listeners up to speed, if you're not up to date with the intricacies of German politics, Olaf Scholz is the SPD Chancellor, which is the leftist party, if you will. And then you have the Christian Democratic Union, CDU. And of course, in Bavaria, it's called the CSU, still CDU, but a little more Catholic than the other part. So it's likely that the CDU slash CSU will win the next election. But the big question is, what showing will Alternative for Deutschland, which is the anti-immigration party, what showing will they get? Because
which is also known in English as Alternative for Germany, for those who those who haven't lived in Germany for a number of years of their life and do not speak German. Maybe that's helpful for them just to add in. Yeah, so that would be interesting because I think they first entered the government in terms of votes into 2017. It was around then, and I think they got about 10% of the vote, and now they're polling to get 20%, which means they won't officially be the government, but they're taking more and more votes away from those major parties, and it's really affecting how much those parties can put through and like the efficiency of their policy making. So it's interesting to see how that will change. And obviously the Christian Democratic Union, is it Union? That was former Chancellor Angela Merkel's party, right? So what do you think about that party in general? Like, do you have many thoughts on
I think they've been they have been the party of government since the Second World War in Germany. They have been in government more than any other party. They are responsible for what's called the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle, which is Germany post Second World War, right? So they're a very strong party, and so it will be very interesting because Alternative for Deutschland in some state elections have polled higher than 35%, particularly in some of the eastern states, the old Eastern Germany, because there's a real backlash against, Angela Merkel's allowing 1 million Syrian refugees into the country. And, like this anti-immigration feeling in many countries around the world is quite intense in Germany. And this is added to the fact that the German economy has some real questions over it. It's still obviously an economic powerhouse and the funders of much of the European budget.
But is it growing as much as it was?
No, and they're losing out economically and competitively with China. They've missed the whole EV revolution. They're still stuck in, they're trying to catch up, but they're still stuck in, fuel-based cars. And they were, world leaders in terms of innovation. And much of their manufacturing industry, China has bought up. And they're doing it better and cheaper in China. It's a big challenge for Germany.
We've talked about that specifically a lot in terms of cars, right? They've always had excellent cars and excellent car industry. But then when it comes to the interface in the car and the technology that's used, it's often rather lacking.
Yep.
And so if you apply that to their entire economy, and you really can in this case, maybe they have the hardware that they need, but the rest of the world is catching up on the hardware and they have far more advanced software.
Correct. It's a really good analogy.
And also the AI revolution that's happening, where is Germany on that? They're kind of just being left in the dust, and there's not a lot of advancements taking place to keep them up with those leaders. But let's hope they manage a way to figure it out, because Europe is really relying on them for a lot of, their success, I suppose.
No, you're right. It's really vital in terms of European leadership, particularly in the world with a Trump presidency. It's really, really important. Now, the challenge is it's the result of being too successful as a country. German quality of life has been pretty good for Germans since the Second World War. They've done economically really well. So the question is, do they have the hunger to continue to compete and innovate? Like, they have SAP, a very large software company, but not many technology companies are based in Germany.
But is that the choice of the German people, or is that the choice of the technology companies? I think Germans are very hardworking, and
We're very hardworking, yes, but
what are they willing to sacrifice, I suppose, in order to have those companies come and make their headquarters there?
It's true, but they're not a very digital economy, right? They were very slow to adopt to e-commerce. They were very slow to adopt to credit cards. I remember when we lived there.
There's still cash in so many number of stores. Like, you walk around the city and there'll be a store that doesn't take card. Yeah. I don't carry cash with me. That doesn't exist for me in my world. So it's always a weird concept. I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I'm on another planet. Back in time.
Yeah, and you just take for granted, because Australia is very advanced in this regard of adopting new technology quickly, whereas Germans are not. They're somewhat distrustful of this new technology. And I think this stems from, the rampant inflation they had between the wars.
In the Weimar period.
Right.
Yeah.
And so therefore they don't trust credit, and they want to buy things with cash.
Actually, speaking of the Weimar period, though, sorry to interrupt, but I was reading about the whole no confidence vote that just happened, and that was a product of the Weimar period.
Oh, really?
Because of the rampant inflation and the political upheaval, etc., they put in a lot of measures following World War II, in order to get a bad chancellor out of the leadership position.
Right.
So they introduced the no confidence vote, which is another, check and balance of a democratic nation state. But yeah, so it's interesting. So we are where we are today because they're responding to that period of time. And that period of time continues to reflect on them, on their ideology and how they go about politics in every way. So we'll see what happens with that. It's a bit of a scary time period. I know as well that the current the current chosen leader of the Christian Democratic Union, he's quite a bit further right than Angela Merkel. He's a Trump supporter. He didn't used to be. I know that when he was when Trump was first in power, his first term, Merz openly criticized him and called him an democracy supporting person, some kind of person trying to upheave the whole system and cause anarchy, etc. And now he's completely flipped his switch, probably just because we're all trying to deal with him, and every leader around the world is desperately scrambling together, to appear like they support him. But they do have some differing views.
Yeah, but that's great that he's trying, because they're going to need to build a relationship with Trump, right? It's vitally important. So that's going to be really fascinating to see where that ends up. And having lived in Germany for a number of years, it holds a special place in my heart. So I hope they work it out. And for the sake of the European project, it's vitally important, because the other big player in Europe, France, is also in a mess. As we spoke about, Michel Barnier fell as prime minister because there was a no confidence vote in him. No confidence is the message or theme of the moment in Europe. And so Macron has appointed a new prime minister. So let's hopefully they last a little longer. But it's a really interesting state of affairs in both Germany and France.
I mean, this is a very big question, but how long do you think Macron is really going to last at this point?
Well, constitutionally, he can last another 2 years, right? It's as president, it's very difficult for someone to get rid of the president in France, right? So I think he's probably going to last out his term, because I think he sees being still in power as the best thing to keep out Marie Le Pen and the far right, because he's hoping that the longer he can last, the more of the investigations into criminalities, etc., regarding Marie Le Pen and taking bribes and using money illegally, etc., might come home to roost.
I also think I heard that she's already been found guilty of a few of those crimes. I'm not sure if that's correct, but it's interesting to see that and to see how that will really affect a candidate for president. You know, when you think about the US, obviously none of that affected the candidacy, but we hope to see in France a very different situation where people care about that, where a felony is not allowed to be put into office. And I think I've seen that she will probably be restricted from entering office for like the next 6 years or something. There was some special clause if one of the cases ends up finding her guilty. So we'll see what happens with that.
And then if we turn our attention to the UK,
just across the pond,
you know, Keir Starmer and his government's having a hard time. They relaunched their 5 missions. People can't really remember all the 5 missions. I can't even remember them all as well. One is about a green economy. One is about getting back to growth.
Yeah. Next episode, we'll have them all written down for you. We'll go through them in detail. We promise.
One is about better social care. One is kind of like the levelling up thing, the North and the South.
Yeah.
And the other one is, you know, repairing the NHS, fundamentally. So there you go. I do remember the broad cross section of them. But the challenge is inflation is rising in the UK. They've put in some really unpopular things in order to raise revenue: increase inheritance tax, increase national insurance. Increased taxes on the inheritance taxes are really impacting farmers, particularly small farmers with only properties that are worth £1 million or £2 million and stuff, going to be paying much more inheritance tax. And of course, anyone who've watched Clarkson's Farm knows how difficult life is as a farmer in the UK, etc. So they had a very short honeymoon, and there's no positivity about the UK economy. It's all doom and gloom, and it's a really bad situation. The latest polls say he is the most unpopular prime minister, close to Liz Truss, right? Who's a joke.
Which is remarkable. I think this is interesting as well, because it doesn't matter what their policies achieve at this point. I think their image problem has gotten so bad that they need to put a lot of efforts into that, which would take away from their governing, like the efficiency of their government itself. But they need to work on that if they want to continue being a successful government. They're not going to be supported by the public at all. And to be less favorable than Liz Truss is, I don't know, it's remarkable, really. It's quite impressive to have gotten to that level of hatred by your own people.
I think this raises the whole issue which is happening with democracies around the world. The game has changed. Incumbent governments are falling everywhere because the public blame them for this rampant inflation. Okay, and there's no escaping it. It's remarkable, right? I mean,
but surely this is something that's happened before, right? Like politics goes in waves.
I don't remember governments being so quickly held to account for their performance regarding inflation. I think society moves much more rapidly today due to social media and podcasts and this sort of thing that we're doing. And so people's expectations are that things should be fixed pronto, right? And when they're not, they give up and they say, okay, we need a new crowd to run this place.
That's interesting, actually. And I know a lot about the whole political inclination, different generations as well. I think that my generation is known for being very interested in politics in general and having a lot to say. So I wonder how that's going to change the game, as all the generations shift and change, et cetera, and the older ones start to age out a bit of public opinion. It'll be interesting to see whether that gets better or it gets worse. This demand for a response from the government, if that's coming from accountability or if it's coming from naivety about how politics itself works, is another interesting question. So yeah, there's a lot happening in Europe right now. There's not many there's not many people out there holding up the mantle of democracy and saying this is the way forward anymore. It's really fallen in.
Apart from the president of Georgia. The president of Georgia happens to be French, and this wasn't on our thing. She happens to be French, but then she became Georgian.
The current president
of Georgia, who's trying to hold everything together.
Who may not be the president of Georgia any longer, like we talked about in the last one. I mean, I think there's a massive worry about that.
But at least she's on the right side of history.
Yeah, for now. I think we should get into Georgian politics a bit more, though, so we have a bit more basis to it. I just know that the protests that have been happening recently in Georgia in response to the man we talked about in a previous podcast, in response to him gaining the majority of the first electoral vote, there have been tons of protests and police brutality in response. So it's quite scary to see that and see how Russia's interference continues to spread across Europe and how the eastern countries are falling from inwardly. Like, they're having their own.
And then, Freddie, you read an article on the North Korean troops on the ground in Ukraine?
Oh, yeah, I did read a little bit about that. I mean, I think that's scary more about what that means. The symbol that means that North Korea is willing to start participating in world events and lending their considerable strength to Russia in all conflicts, because that feels like that's what they're saying, and they've often kept out of most things.
Sure, they've been isolation.
They've been incredibly isolationist, and wanting to just build up their own strength. But now they're showing to the world that they're ready to take a bigger part, which is a very scary situation. I remember being so confounded by North Korea when I was in about year 9, year 10, and me and all our friends going home and watching YouTube videos and researching it and being absolutely stunned and almost impressed by this idea of a country who is so incredibly powerful and so evil. How can it even exist in today's world?
It's like in a James Bond movie.
It's like in a James Bond movie, but the more you learn about the world, the more you realize that this stuff exists everywhere, and the world is still incredibly unequal. It's just this weird.
But North Korea has somewhat of a powerful military, but a whole population in utter poverty because they put all their money into that. It's a little crazy rocket man, as Trump would call it.
Crazy rocket man. God, I don't think Elton John would approve of that name. Elton John just got named as the icon of the year by Time. Did you read about this? Yeah, very exciting. But that was just a little side note. The last thing we really wanted to talk about, the government deficit in Australia and obviously the nuclear situation and how this is all creating a massive snowball that's just hurtling towards the Labor government and getting ready to destroy them. Everything in its path of the coalition is coming back, and it's quite a scary time. So what do you have to say about the deficit?
So the government just talked about a mid-year budget. So it's predicted there will be a deficit in Australia. It had surpluses the last few years because commodity prices have been high. Unexpectedly high, yes. And so there's going to be deficits going forward. And inflation seems to be moderating, but, given these deficits, the opposition is now saying the government's been spending too much money. Of course, Jim Chalmers would say if the government hadn't spent that money, Australia would be in recession because the only thing holding the Australian economy up is immigration and government spending. Okay. And so we would be in recession if it wasn't for that. So it's an interesting political angle from the opposition, because if they are taking the task on that, the challenge is I don't think the voters are listening. I think they blame the government for inflation, even though the Labor government's done a lot of good things. And I think it's very dangerous. Now, I think with the nuclear stance of the opposition, I think it gives Labor something to attack on the opposition side, because some of their numbers seem a little, or maybe majorly flaky in terms of how quickly they could get nuclear up and running. And so that'll be interesting. The coalition has just released their costings on nuclear, which are pretty massive.
I mean, we've all seen that. We've all seen the CSIRO and nearly everyone else who you would go to ask about such a thing respond to the coalition's budgeting. And obviously the numbers are enormous, ridiculous numbers that if you're talking about doing it in the time that they want you to do it, it's just taking a massive step back. And it's a red herring. That's not what they want to focus on. Nuclear will probably still not happen for many a year. It's just they want to take the attention away from renewables. But yeah, no, it's definitely a good thing for the Labor government to attack them on. It shows that they just don't have any policies even tucked away in their back pocket. They simply just don't seem prepared. To me, at least. I guess not to the majority of the population.
But it's a really unusual stance for the Liberal Party to do this huge government intervention to establish a nuclear industry with government funding to do that. It's really unlike a Liberal Party. Generally, they don't do such a thing. So it's a brave move. And it's interesting how it might play out, because Labor's Achilles heel in this is that they are anti-nuclear no matter what. And I think it's a very dangerous thing, because they should amend that policy to say, as part of the mix, there is potentially a place for small nuclear reactors in the future as the energy needs of the country continue to expand. Of course, renewables will be key, but there may be an opportunity for that, whether people are serious about it or not. But the fact that Labor says no, under no circumstances, I don't think that passes the pub test.
I don't think, well, I'm not sure. I have a lot of thoughts on this, because I think even a few years ago, I would go and I would talk to people, and I talk to you even, and the amount of backlash to any mention of nuclear in this country was massive. And how have we gone from that country who absolutely detested even the idea of nuclear and would ever even consider it, to being one where voters are willing to vote in a party whose only energy solution is to use massive spending for nuclear?
But they would say that's not their only engine. They're going to still do renewables, etc., but not as quickly as
but
Labor.
Their image is presented.
No, the image.
That nuclear is their only.
Well, you know what I think? I think there's been a fundamental change in society. I think The Voice was a total disaster for the government. I think there's an anti-woke backlash. And I think people worry about the cost of living, and they worry about their hip pocket and keeping the lights on. And these messages are powerful. And so I think people's attitudes to nuclear has changed. I think there's a fundamental change in societies around the world, which we haven't seen in decades.
But you can also say that, but politics does come and go. There is a change, but I don't believe that it's not a change that we can come back from.
All these things, swings and roundabouts.
Of course. I think it's simply, I've done a lot of research into South American politics, and I know that this is definitely the name of the game in South America. In most of the countries there, they have massive swings to the left and right almost every year. You have the most populist right-wing leader you've ever had, and then maybe you have an incredibly populist left-wing leader suddenly staging a coup to take back over the government. And it feels like that's almost where politics is shifting for the rest of the world, but that doesn't mean there aren't still going to be swings in both directions. It just means it's less predictable.
You're right, Freddie, and I think in the end, good governments are returned. People want governments to achieve things. They want them to improve their lives, right? And if governments can do that, they will get into power. And if governments claim things and they don't achieve them, they'll be put out of power. It's really very clear, right? And so, but there is this massive swing against incumbent governments around the world. And as I said, reduction of focus on woke scenarios, reduction on focus on the environment, etc. So it'll be fascinating what goes on there. So watch this space, and we think, election's going to be called after the Christmas holidays, etc. And like we both predicted in March. or thereabouts.
And
Maybe my
please-
birthday or your birthday.
Maybe that would be rather fabulous. And please, all of you, let us know if there are any topics you want us to discuss, because we would love to. We want to make this as interactive as possible. And if you have a chance, leave a review on our Spotify or Apple Podcasts, because that means a lot to us. But thank you so much for tuning in. And sorry, what do you want to say?
I thought we were doing Vanuatu as well.
Oh, yeah, of course. Maybe we can leave it for next
Well, let's just
time.
do a quick mention and then we'll finish.
Okay.
There was a huge earthquake in Vanuatu, so Australian support, many planes and specialists have gone there to assist because it's pretty bad, and Vanuatu obviously doesn't have the resources. Again, this is a great humanitarian thing by the Australian government, as you'd expect. It's a major power in the region. And on the back of that, just been announced today, a new security pact with the Solomon Islands. Remember that China was looking to put a Navy base in the Solomon Islands, and I think Australia is spending $190 million to do that. So also good news there. So on the back of that. And
foreign policy of the likes you definitely won't see from the coalition, since they are not big. They definitely weren't big supporters of the Pacific Alliance.
Well, they're just not as nuanced. They're just not as intelligent.
No, but when they were in government, they never did anything of the like to support that area of the world. And we've seen really the Labor government, that's one of the things they've excelled at, creating those alliances. Penny Wong being a great foreign.
Penny Wong's done a great job. So to all our listeners, Merry Christmas, have a great time, and you will hear from us soon
Christmas
after.
and happy holidays.
Bye.
We'll celebrate. Bye.